Hello and welcome to this quick start guide on using Django internationalization within your application. So in this tutorial, we're going to prepare a Django application, just a small application to offer multiple languages. So to give you a little bit of a preview of what we're building here, this is a really small scale. I may have gone overboard here with the graphics. So this is the home page. It's in English. So we've set up this system for 2 languages. You can add more, obviously. So we can go to French. And now it's the whole page will have now turned into French. Now we can then also traverse and go into other pages. Now utilizing this new structure, this URL structure. So the FR there is really determining or helping Django determine how to translate this page. It should be in French, for example. So there you go, it's in French. That's all we're really translating is the word hello at this point. Because if I go back into English, and then go back to that page, you can see now it's in English. So this is the setup that we're going to go for. I'll go through the different details. We're going to just have a look at this tutorial, like I said, having a look at the template tags and how to kind of set up a basic template for internationalization. Now, looking at the broader scope of this internationalization and localization here in Django, we do have a number of key areas here. So we can be looking at translating text, obviously, on the page, but internationalization is a little bit more than that because potentially time, dates, and numbers are all different depending on what languages you're working in. And of course, we have time zones as well, which might also affect your application. So in this tutorial, we're just focusing on a little bit on translating text. So again, just to give you a broader view of what's happening here, although I'm very focused here on just translating text, of course, text might be in a model. You might find text in the database, in the template, in the form. So here, we're just going to focus on a basic setup, looking at the template, so translating text in a template. So in this tutorial, we're going to go through this process, which is useful to know before we start this. So our process is very simple. We're going to mark a string for translation within our template. We're then going to run the makemessages command, and that's essentially going to scan our application for where we've entered or where we've defined strings that need translating. And then what we can do, we will produce a document, and on there, we'll be able to then go into our different languages and specify what the translation is. So we have to manually type in the translation. So once we've done that, we then compile those messages into a new file, and then we can run our application. So before we can actually perform translations here on Windows, we're going to need to install the GNU gettext utilities so that we can use the makemessages commands. So what we're going to need to do here then is just head over here to the 3.0 topic /I18. So this is internationalization, just a short word abbreviation for internationalization, I18N translation. And then here we've got the get text on Windows. I'll leave a link in the description for you. So follow that link and then you'll be presented with this link here. And this will take you to the pre-compiled binary installer for Windows. So you'll be presented with this page here. You just need to download the 64-bit or the 32-bit. So go ahead and download that and then just go run through that, install it. There isn't really much there to talk about. And then you'll just need to make sure that if you want to then run it, typically you need to restart the terminal in order to get that working. Okay, so let's quickly whiz through a setup here of a Django application. So I've created a new project folder in Visual Studio Code here. So first thing is then install the venf. So use the commands here. I'm just going to breeze through these very quickly. So set up a new virtual environment. Then of course we need to activate it. And then I go ahead and install Django. So go ahead and start a new project. Don't forget the space and the dot at the end is important. So we're creating a new project here in our folder. And then we can now run the manage.py file. So we can then start an app. And we're going to call this lang. So let's just go ahead and just register this application. We're not going to be using a database in this case, but just because we can, so lang, that needs to be in there. Then we're going to set up the URLs. So let's go ahead and do that. So first of all, bring in include, because we're going to include this set in. Okay, so I've gone ahead and added a new path for this. So I'm just referencing the URLs in the lang, which I'm now going to build. So let's just create a new file here called urls.py. And then inside of here, what I want to now do is just specify a single URL, which is going to be the home page. So from the top, we've imported the path so I can create URL patterns. I've then imported the views because we're going to be utilizing a view in a second, app name lang to match up the namespace in the URL cores here. And then we've added a new path here to the home. So now that's all set up, I can go into my views and I can quickly just create, a new view here. And this is just going to take in the request. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start off then our translations right here. So the first thing we need to do is identify a string we want to translate. Right, so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to use the gettext tool. And this is a tool which is worth reading up a little bit about. So if you read through the documentation here, you can see that standard translation, which we're doing here, we can specify translation strings by using the function gettext. So that's why we're using it here. So Python standard library gettext. So it's a standard Python library. Now, if we want to expand on this slightly, we're going to need to install in a minute a package for, in this case, I'm using Windows, and it's going to be slightly different on your operating system if you're using a different operating system to Windows. But this is the tool basically that's going to flag the strings that we want to translate. Then we're going to use a different utility, which is going to then translate that into a file, which we can then edit the names against the different languages. And then we need to compile that file. This is what I was explaining earlier in the process. So this is pivotable. This is important, tool that we're using here from, as it says here, the Python standard library. Okay, so we bring that in. Now, anything we want to translate here, we're using an underscore to define the fact that the next thing is going to be the thing we want to translate, the string that we want to translate. So let's go ahead now and let's just add a new variable here called, say, trans equals. And now I want to translate a string. So I use the underscore to kind of match this up here. And then I then define my string. So let's just go for, hello, right? Okay, so now all I'm going to do is just going to render that out onto the page. So there we go. We're just returning this render. I'm presuming that you understand this to understand kind of, or how to actually implement this. I'm assuming that you've got some basic knowledge here of Django. So we're just going to render that out. So we're going to need a new folder in lang here. So I'm going to create a new folder, call that, of course, templates. And inside of here, I'm just going to put the new file home. So this is the default area Django is going to look, isn't it, for templates. What am I doing? HTML.html, home.html. There we go. And then we're just going to need some sort of template. So again, let's just go over to, Bootstrap and just grab a simple template. So in the docs in the introduction, scroll down, go to starter templates, copy that. Apologize if I'm going too quickly here. There we go. So we've got our template there. You can pause and quickly grab that if you want to follow this. So that's all we need. And now, of course, what we want to do is just output that string, which is referred to as translated, or trans, sorry. So we're referencing that string there through trans, the data, into our template. And now we should be able to go ahead, hopefully, if we've done this right, and run the server. There's no problems. So let's go back into our page. Let's just open our page again. There we go. So we have hello. So now we want to go through the process of actually translating this into another language. So we're going to have to enable our project to work with translation. So we're going to need this middleware here. So it does specify on this page, which is the translation overview page here. So this middleware needs to go in a very specific place. So let's go into our settings here and in the core. So we want to put this after sessions because our language settings can be placed in a session, for example. So we want the session to run first. and then before the common. So the common deals with the URLs, and later on we're going to set up URLs so that we can go to different languages based upon the URL, and that's all going to happen automatically. So we want to be able to have that setting before we sort out the URLs. So this is why we have it before the common, and that's kind of a general overview why it's going to be there. So that's important. Okay, so there's some more settings now we want to configure. Of course, we want to specify what language we want to work with. So to do that, we'll go down to the bottom or wherever you want to put it here, and we just need to now specify some languages. So we've got this languages here, and you can see that I've just specified 2 languages here, and that's going to be English and French. Now notice also I can actually translate the languages. So of course French in French won't look like that, will it? So we can also translate that too. So you can see I've already added the underscore there, and I can then add in the import, put it up the top of course if you prefer. I'll just put it there for now so you can see what's happening. So I can also translate this too, which is handy. So those are the settings. That's going to define what languages that I want to work with. Now I can also kind of set a default language here. So language code, for example, so I can set a default language if I wanted to. And that's pretty much it we're going to need there, apart from one more thing. So what's going to happen is we're going to scan, like I said, for the translations that are needed, that we specified, and they need to go into a folder. So let's create a new folder here. Just to follow the same kind of naming conventions. So inside of here, I'm going to create a new folder, one for English, EN, and then I'm going to create a new folder for French. There we go. So those are my 2 languages that I've selected. Okay, so now I've done that, and now I've actually got something that needs to be translated. I can now run the tool to kind of scan, find those, and create a new file, which I can then edit in the French, for example, and then make the translation. Okay, so let's do that. So py manage.py, and now let's run the make messages, and we just run the all. So we're just going to blanket this. So that should take a couple of seconds, and notice straight away now inside of our folders we now have the PO file. So let's go over to the French PO file and let's have a look in here, because we can see if we go down we have the word hello, and that was in my view. So it's identified that this needs translated. So hopefully at this point you can see what's happening here. Anything you flag, so we've got French and English, which was flagged, is now going to be in this file, among other things here that we've utilized in the all, we've kind of selected. So bonjour, hello in French. Okay, so that's the French equivalent, right? So now we've done that, we've got this in place. We now, once we're happy with that, let's just go back into here, and now we want to run a new command, compile this or these settings so we can actually use them. So let's go ahead and now run that. So this is going to be compile messages. So let's now go back into our view and make a few changes here. So what we need to do is bring in some tools, because we want to make a translation and send it to the template. That's what we're going to do here. So let's bring in some tools. So from translation, there's a number of different tools, and I've brought them in this way just to show you them. Get language, activate, and of course get text we were using earlier. So get language is going to be a tool that allows us to identify language we're currently using. Activate is going to activate a language, and then get text, that's obviously where we define what the string that we want to translate. And of course, before we're just referencing it as the underscore here to save us write get text everywhere. So it's like a nice, neater way of working. So let's first of all, we're going to make a new function here called translate, and we're going to pass in a language of FR, which is one of our languages that we translate our text into, our strings into in this system. That's what we defined in our setting, of course, at the bottom. So one thing also to notice that before I didn't add the comma to the middleware, so just make sure we've got that comma, otherwise you'll receive an error. Okay, so back in our view then, so we're going to create a new function here called translate. Going to pass in the language here to it, FR, and now what I want to do is get the current language. So I put the current language in this variable here. Now what I can now do is print it out if I wanted to see it. So that's going to produce the current language. So I can go ahead and try and activate the language that I passed in, which is French. So I then am going to select something I want to translate. Again, I can just use the underscore there if I wanted to, but I brought that in just to purposely show you what's going on. It's the same thing. So next up then, I try and activate. If I can't activate, then I'm basically going to just activate my current language, whatever that might be, as like a fallback. And then I return the text. So I return the translated text over to my function here, and then I'm going to output that. So let's have a look to see if that works. So if you remember before, what we had was just, I think it was just hello. So now if I refresh, it now says hello. That was a surprise. So let's work out why this is. So if you go into the settings, if you remember before, we made a folder here, but what we actually haven't done is we actually haven't told Django where this folder is. So we've gone through the process of actually utilizing it. It looks like it's been the default folder to actually create all these files within this named folder here. So it looks like we've been following the pattern that's already preset, but we haven't actually told Django where it is. So let's go ahead and do that. So we can do that with the path here. So base directory and the name of the folder, whatever it is that you want it to be. So let's go up here and just let's import OS. We're going to need this so we can access the folder structure of our operating system. So base directory and the folder name. So now we've got that in place. Let's just run our server again. And now let's refresh. And there we go. We now have the translations. So hopefully this gives you a general idea now of what's happening here with these commands, how it's working. We need to activate the new language, how we've used gettext to actually identify what to change, and then also the getting the current language. Okay, so now we can go a little bit more crazy, I guess, and let's go into our template. And now let's add something here that we want to translate. So now for us to work in a template here, what we're going to need to do is to load in the internationalization tool. So I1AN at the top here. So that needs to be up the top. And then you can see here, I've used a template tag here of translate. And then I'm just asking Django to translate here, hello. So you can see I can use the translate here in the title to change the title. So let's also put this here just before the trans. So this was the translation we performed earlier on the word hello. So we've got that in. So now, of course, at the moment, we're not actually going to be translating this because our default language is English. So let's just go back to here and just refresh. So you can now see it says hello, bonjour. And up the top here, this is obviously the title name and it's still hello. So we're now going to build a very quick kind of switch so that we can change between languages. So I just add some extra HTML and just build this up slightly so it looks a little bit more effective, as if we were going to implement it in our page. So let's go to the docs here. And I'm just going to go to the introduction. I just need to bring in the JavaScript bundle here. So I'm just going to copy that JavaScript bundle and just place it just below here. So that's the JavaScript bundle for Bootstrap. So I can then run a drop down and then I'll just go down into the components here and I'm just going to select a nav bar and just grab the top nav bar that has a drop down. So I just copy this, move across. You can just check out the code, save you having to kind of follow all this. So I've done that and then I've got rid of the form to form the form at the end of this. And then we want to keep this, or we want to get rid of disabled list item here. And then we're going to keep this drop down menu here and this li here. So we're going to call this where it says drop down, I'm going to say language. And then I want to get rid of this link here. And then we just keep the link to the home page for now. I'm going to call that, I'm just going to make a new page in a minute. So let's just call that item page, for example. And then we'll remove the active so it's not a different color. And yeah, I think There's no href there, no. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So if we now look at our page, we should have a nice little navigation bar up the top here. If I just zoom out a bit, we'll have the language drop down working in a minute. Notice it's not working. Maybe I've got rid of... let's have a look at the top here. Okay, so for some reason it's not working. So the reason why it's not working is because I've added the script here just to show you. Mine's already included at the bottom here. So up the top or at the bottom, it doesn't matter. So let's just go back and refresh. So you can now see that we've got the drop down. So obviously we want to now place all the languages that we have available on our system in this drop down so we can select it and change the language of the page. So with the following approach, what we're doing is we're going to build URLs, and in the URL, Django is going to automatically place the current language that's set. And by doing that, so there's nothing we need to do. We're just continue utilizing our normal paths. This will just automatically happen when we select different languages. So we have this prefix, which is the language, and that then also allows Django to determine what language to display this page in. So this is what's going to happen. Let's just set this up and we can see this happening. So let's first of all go into our, we're going to need to go into our core, and we're basically going to need to define what paths we want to include in our internationalization. So let's just extract it from here. I'm just going to separate this. Oh, I should do it the other way, shouldn't I? Oh, no. Yeah, let's do it the other way. So let's just copy this down. Okay, so we're just going to have one path. So essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to flag, or we're going to detail what paths we want to use for internationalization. So let's just bring in the tools first. So the I18M patterns. And then what we're going to need to do is just add now. So instead of equals, we're just going to add this to the URLs. We're just doing it separately here so you can see what's going on. And there we go. So basically any of the paths that are inside of here, remember this is the includes in the core. So we can't utilize the I18 patterns on an included set of URLs. We have to do it here on the core. That's important. So we can't do this in the lang project. So this is done then in the core URLs. So we've enabled the patterns, and then we've gone off and we've kind of identified then the internationalization paths that we want to activate. And of course, then anything in there can then be utilized for that. So what we can also do, let's not forget, is we can use our gettext just about anywhere. So here, for example, if we wanted to have separate names for the admin, well, we could do that. So let's just enable that, for example. There we go. So potentially we could, we'll look at this in further tutorials, but we could change the URL potentially, or translate the URL. Anyway, so let's move down to here. So we're plus equals, so we're going to add this to the main URLs essentially, and then all the other URLs that we have obviously within, I say obviously, in our URLs here. So we're just adding them as per normal. Right, so we've only got one URL here, and that's home. So that is now enabled. So now let's go back into our views, our template here, and let's just set this up. So I'm just going to remove these two items here and the translations, and we're just going to add now a little, set up the drop down. So we'll just remove the items that are inside of this drop down, existing drop down. So I'll get rid of those. Okay, so now we need to iterate over the languages that are available in order for us to make this list that we want to build. So let's have a look at some of the tools that we can bring in here. So we can get the current language if we want as language code, and then we can go ahead and use the get available languages. So we can get the current language and get the available languages. Now what we want to do is we want to kind of iterate over them and to list them out, of course. So if we go into the Django documentation here, we can have a look at some of these commands. So the get language info list to retrieve information for the list of languages. So we can use it to iterate over the languages in the template. So for available languages langs. and then we can loop it out. So let's do that. So we're going to essentially now just list these out. So let's drop this into our code here. So we're going to use the get language info list for languages as languages. Now, essentially what we're doing here is we're just getting a list of all the languages. So with our list then in languages, let's go ahead and iterate. So for each item in languages, we're just going to create a new list item. And then we are then going to create a link in here for that. So this is going to be a drop-down item. This is a Bootstrap class here, and the href is going to be / then the language code. So that's what we want to put there, / language code / to build that up. And then we can then add the language local name. So that's going to be obviously the name of the tag there. Right, so now we've got that in, that literally just loops around and then sets up the link for it. So what we're doing here is we're actually setting up the link here, and this can be expanded and changed because we could also, because you'll see that when we click on this, it's going to take us then to essentially the home page all the time, but it is going to change the language. And by adding that there at the prefix of our URL, like I said, Django is going to then be able to determine what language we want to display or render that page in. So with that in place, let's have a look to see what this looks like. So we now have, oh, we've now got a problem. Let's go back into our server then. So it looks like we've got an error here. So core URLs, line 11. Okay, so line 11, we've got our URL patterns. Okay, so what we're going to need here is a parentheses. So not the brackets there. So, okay, that should fix that. And let's refresh. Okay, so we've got our languages. So at the moment, doesn't look like they're appearing. The actual text isn't appearing, but you can see that it's going to be taking us to the right place. So let's have a look at why that isn't working. So I've just renamed this incorrectly. So you can see here that each time we loop through, we're referring to the item as lang. So let's just put that back to lang. So now it should output the actual name. So there we go, English and French. So you can see as I click on English and French, it's changing the prefix there to the rest of the URL. So what we're going to do now is just, well, let's have a look, shall we? So let's just add something in here. Let's just get rid of this action. We're not going to need that. So let's just go ahead and add a new div here. Just build a quick container. So inside of here, if you remember, we passed in from our view, we were passing in the translated hello. But this time, what we're going to do here is not pass that in. We're just going to ask an item or string to be translated here on the template. So if you remember previously, we used the translate template tag, and then here I'm just going to put the string hello. So now that should be translated. So let's have a look. And we're going to refresh. We've got bonjour because we're in French. And if we go to English, that changes back to hello. So remember that we've been through that process of creating those and defining those translations if yours doesn't work. And remember, you then need to, once you've created your translation strings that you want to translate, remember then you need to run the command. So that command, remember, was makemessages. So that's then going to create the files, remember, on the left-hand side here. So we can go into our profiles and we've changed hello. If I go into the French version, you can see that we've changed that manually. And then they've gone and compiled this utilizing the compile messages, no space. So that compiled it, remember, and that's why this is working. So there we go. That's a simple example for us to start off with. Okay, so you don't have to take my word for this. Let's just make a new page. I think we started to. So yeah, let's make a quick URL just to showcase this. So we'll call this item / views and then item. So name's going to be item. So just make a new page just to show that it will affect all the other pages once we've started this, and you can then see how that prefix works and then gets added to the base of the URL. So we're going to go to the path item. So let's go into our views. We're just going to change this home. I've copied this down into item, and then we're not going to need that. So we're just going to return the template item. We're not going to pass anything in. There's no context we need to send across. So that's what we've got for the item. So let's just go into our home. We'll copy and paste that. We'll call that item. So that's our template. And then of course, there's nothing we need to do there because it's going to just translate. That's all good. So let's have a look at that. Oh, I'm going to need a link, aren't I? I'm going to need a link to it, but that's cool. So when I now go to item / you can now see it's also being translated. So just to confirm, that's the item page. Let's just write something here in a p tag, for example. It's going to be the item page. Okay, so now we can go back here, just refresh. It says the item page, bonjour, and let's just go into English, and you can see it's in English, but it takes us back to the home page, remember, because we've not set that up. Then go to item, and you can now see it's back in English. So if you take a look at the djangopackages.org and have a look for internationalization, there's a few popular packages here potentially that you might want to take a look at to add some functionality. So take a look at some of these. For example, we could look at, for example, the Django Rosetta. That could be useful. The Parler software here, and Django Solid I18N URLs. So there's a few softwares here that you might want to take a look at, and maybe I can feature them in further tutorials. Okay, so that's a brief introduction then to Django internationalization. Hopefully that's got you started now thinking about now incorporating and just really getting you started utilizing Django internationalization. Now have a look through the documentation. It probably makes it a lot easier now to work with the documentation in that you've now got an example to work with. I feel as though the Django documentation, how it's wonderful, it's absolutely wonderful, but it's a little bit confusing to get things at least started to this point to move on. So hopefully this has been useful. And that's per normal. Hopefully I'll see you in the next tutorial.